Hi everybody, welcome to the third session of the rise of nationalism in India. In the second part, we have studied what is non-cooperation movement, how it spread in cities and towns, or how the people in the cities and towns responded to the non-cooperation movement. In this part, we are going to learn how the non-cooperation movement spread in the countryside, or how the people in the countryside responded to the non-cooperation movement. In the countryside, the peasants and the tribals had actively involved in the non-cooperation movement. The peasants and the tribals had their own interpretations and their own justifications and reasons for joining in the non-cooperation movement. Apart from the national interest, they had their own personal interest to join in the non-cooperation movement. They had to fight not only against the British government, but also they had to fight against the landlords who exploited them. In Awadh, the peasants' movement was led by Baba Ramchandra. Do you know who was Baba Ramchandra? Baba Ramchandra was a sannyasi. The peasants' movement in Awadh was a rebellion against the talukdars and the big landlords who demanded high rent, and a variety of cesses were imposed upon the poor peasants. The poor peasants had to do bigar and they had to work under landlords' farms without any payment. Do you know what is bigar? Bigar is a system in which the poor peasants were forced to do any kind of manual job without any payment. And the peasants demanded mainly three things. Do you know which are three things demanded by the peasants? Number one, reduction of revenue. Second one, abolition of bigar. And the third one, the social boycott of the oppressive landlords. You have to remember one thing, that the poor peasants in Indian villages did not own their own land. They were mere tenants. As tenants, there was no security of tenure, and they had no right over the leased land. In many places, Nai Dobi Bandh was organized by the panchayats to deprive the landlords of the services of even barbers and washermen. In June 1920, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru visited Awadh and talked to the poor peasants about their grievances. And by October 1920, the Awadh Kisan Sabha was set up to protect the interest of the poor peasants in Awadh. Over 300 branches of the Awadh Kisan Sabha was set up across the place. Indian National Congress wanted to make the Awadh Kisan movement as one of the nationalist struggles, or they wanted to make it as a wide nationalist movement. At the same time, the Congress party leaders were unhappy with the methods of agitation because they violated the principle of non-violence, right? They attacked the talukdars and merchants' houses. Big bazaars were looted, grain hordes were taken over, and in many villages, the village leaders told to the poor peasants that Mahatma Gandhi had declared no taxes to be paid to the government, and the land was going to be distributed to the poor peasants. I think it is clear to everyone. Now we will move on to the next topic. How the non-cooperation movement spread among the tribals, or how the tribals responded to the non-cooperation movement. As peasants, tribals had their own justifications and reasons to join in the non-cooperation movement. They had their own interpretations about Mahatma Gandhi's message and the idea of Swaraj. In the Godam hills of Andhra Pradesh, a militant guerrilla movement began to spread in the early 1920s. The Indian National Congress could not support the tribal movement as they violated the principle of non-violence. According to the forest laws, the colonial government had closed the large areas of forest, which prevented the people entering into the forest for grazing their cattle, collecting firewood, and collecting fruits. It really provoked the tribals as the British government denied the basic livelihood, and they also believed that the British government was trying to destroy their culture and traditions. And when the tribals were forced to contribute Bigar, they started revolt against the British government. Alluri Sitharam Raju was their leader. He was a person of a peculiar character. He believed that he had some supernatural powers. He could do astrological predictions, heal people, and even he could survive bloodshots. His followers proclaimed that he was the incarnation of God. He was inspired by Mahatma Gandhi's non-cooperation movement, and he wanted the people to wear khadi and to give up drinking. Inspired by his words and advices, the tribals attacked police stations and many government offices. And many violent attacks were organized here and there. Finally, Sitharam Raju was caught by the British police and he was executed in the year of 1924. So I believe you understood this topic. Now we will move on to the next topic, how the plantation workers responded to the non-cooperation movement. Or what was the response of the plantation workers to the non-cooperation movement. Like the tribals, the plantation workers also had their own interpretations about Mahatma Gandhi's message and the idea of Swaraj. For the plantation workers of Assam, freedom meant the right to move from one place to another, or the right to move from their plantations to the villages and to retain a link with the villages from which they had come. According to the Inland Immigration Act of 1859, the plantation workers were not allowed to leave the plantations without permission. Unfortunately, the poor workers were not given permission. And when they heard about the non-cooperation movement, they thought that Gandhian Raj or Gandhian era was going to happen and they were going to give land in their own villages. So they decided to leave the plantations, believing that all their problems would get over. They left plantations, but they could not reach to their destinations. They were caught by the police and severely beaten by the police. They believed that one day will come, and on that day, all their troubles were going to get over. When the tribals chanted Mahatma Gandhi's name and raised slogans demanding Swatantra Bharat, definitely we could relate it to an all India agitation against the British government.